Hello everyone, this is Chidumen Namdi. Welcome to this video course lesson. Here we are going to learn about the Angular at-if control flow syntax. Now the at-if control flow syntax is one of the control flow syntaxes release that came with the newest Angular version 17. Now we are going to learn how to use the at-if control flow syntax in our templates and what it does. We have our component here, if test. Now we open here. So we begin by writing the app followed by if, open and close braces, and then brackets. Now in between these brackets is where we are going to add our expression, and this expression must resolve to a Boolean value. Now if this expression resolves to a Boolean value, then Angular will render whatever that is between these brackets. So now let's say we have true here, and here we have our element. Now since this resolves to true, now Angular is going to render this element. So that's what we see here. Now if we change this to false, because this is false, Angular is not going to render this now. So it's going to remove it from the DOM. So you see it disappears from the DOM. So this is a basic way of using the at-if control flow syntax. So you see we did not import the ngIf directive or import any other external module so that we can use this at-if control flow syntax. So you see it is embedded inside the Angular template engine, and we can use it at will without any import at all. Now let's see on how we can conditionally render elements based on the value of this counter. Now let's say if the counter is greater than 90, we'll render something here, say something like counter is, so it won't render because the counter is 90, it is not greater than 90. But if we say render if counter is greater than or equals to 90, so you see it renders. So this is how the at-if control flow syntax works in a basic syntax. Now we can see that using this control flow syntax makes it easier for developers to understand, because it kind of like resembles the if condition we have in JavaScript. So it resembles something like this: at counter greater than equals to something like this. So you see it strikes a remarking resemblance with what we have in JavaScript. So it's, and also have a very it's basic and doesn't require anything to learn, because it's mostly what we have in JavaScript. So what just stands out is just this at. So this is just kind of like what tells the Angular template that, hey, see, we are having a control flow syntax here. So it's just similar to what we have in JavaScript, the normal if expression or if conditional expression we have. So it will evaluate whatever we have here, and then if it returns, if it resolves to true, it will now render whatever we have here. So, and now this is the element we have in between the braces to render. So anything outside here, like now let me say we can still have elements outside, like say they will still render. Then you have anything, let me say button, that's still going to render. So whatever, so what it touches is just like, it's just this element inside. And also we can also prefill it with elements, more elements also. Let's just say this one, span counter, and also render the counter. So you see all these elements will now be rendered if the condition here resolves to true. So if it doesn't resolve to true, now these two elements will not be rendered. Now let's say we make the counter 80. So you see both of them goes away. If we make it 90, they come back. Now, just like we have in JavaScript if condition, we also have the else condition that executes if the condition here resolves to false. So also we have the at else control flow syntax attached to this at if control flow syntax that executes when the condition here or the expression here resolves to false. So it's similar to what we have in JavaScript like this. So you see it. So now what happens here is if this condition resolves to false, now all the elements inside this bracket will now be will be displayed in place of this. So now let's run it and now make this 90 80. Let's make it not to pass. So you see now this else elements is what is now rendered. So you see how the at if works. We don't have to import anything and it works just like magic, without any importation, and makes our code cleaner. So this code here is similar to what we have when using the ngIf. You can remember when we use the ngIf directive. So it's similar to what we have here. Yeah. But with this, it makes it very similar and it makes it looks exactly like what we have in JavaScript. Now let's convert this code to use the ngIf directive so that we can see how we can also do it in ngIf and also see which any of the approach is simpler and more better. Now to convert this code using the ngIf, first we have to import the ngIf directive. We are doing this because right now Angular has ported all its built-in components directive to be standalone components, just like this one. So if we want to use standalone components inside a standalone component, we have to import them inside the imports array of that component we want to use it. So for this, so we want to use the ngIf inside this component, so we will import it inside here. So to do that, we'll just write ngIf. So automatically we have an import from it at the Angular/common module. Now to convert this, we'll first create an ng template. Let me remove this so that we can toggle off the copilot. Then we'll carry the else syntax, put here, then name it else template. Now we'll remove this and then we add ng container here because we don't want to add an additional component. We don't want to add an additional. We use the ng container here because we want to conditionally render these components. Now we cannot set the ngIf inside these components or this one, so it will only affect this element without affecting this one. So because of that, and also we don't want to add an enclosing element, like we can say div to enclose both of them so that we can now append the ngIf inside this element. So doing this, you see that we have changed the markup of our template because of using the ngIf. So that's why we are using the ng container. The ng container is just a built-in component that we can use to add hidden elements inside our Angular without affecting the DOM. So here we write our ngIf like this. Now we'll carry this our expression inside it, and now we'll now add the else and make it target. Now we now add the else template. So now we save. So you see it works. The same thing as we had when we use the at if control flow. So you see the counter here, this one is being rendered because the condition here is false. So the template is now rendered in place of this. So now if we make it 90, save, this now will be rendered. So now we have seen both approaches now, and from what we can conclude, we will notice that the at if control flow syntax is much better and much cleaner. Why? Because when we use this at ng if directive, we had to import an extra package for it. Now have to use ng templates and ng containers, and now most developers forget what these two means, like what they are and even how to use it, and they're also very much harder to understand and also much harder to use this style of code to render our if condition here. So this code looks strange and it's much more complex than using the at if control flow syntax. So now let's convert it to the at if control flow syntax so that you now see it's very simple and looks much better. So easily we just add our else. Now remove this. So you will see. So you see, very simple and neat. Yeah, we don't have to go the extra mile of importing modules and using some strange asterisks just to render a condition. So you see, this is purely straightforward and very easy to understand. Also noting that most programming languages use the if and else conditions. So this appeals to every developer regardless of the background they are coming from. So we see how easy the at if control flow syntax is to use and how safe it's used and how maintainable the code looks. We are not done yet. We can also use the else if statement in the at control flow syntax. Now, just like we have in JavaScript, let me say if true, and now we come here and say else if. So this executes if this condition is false. So with this we can also nest another else if. So something like this. So this else if executes if the nearest if condition resolves to false. So this resolves to false, it executes. If this resolves to false, then this executes. Then till when there is else or when the last else if executes. So it's not a must, it must end in else. So this else if just executes if the nearest if condition is false. So in the same way, we can also add it in the at if control flow syntax. It supports the else if. So we can come here and say at else if. Now we'll not add our condition here. If I'm gonna say counter is equals to 100. Now we can now write our elements that we want to render when the else if resolves to true. So we can now say counter is 100. Oh, sorry, we'll have to close this. I think something else opened up here. So what this does is, if the counter is greater than or equals to 90, it executes, and everything here does not execute at all. Now, but if the counter is 80, so this is false, then this else if executes. If the expression here, the counter is 100, then this renders and it skips this at else. Now, let's see how we can make this execute. So, if counter is greater than or equals to, so we can just say if counter is 80. So, we can now catch it. So, now, this else if executes. Now, let's make this else if block to execute and to render this counter is 80. So, now, let's change this thing here to 80. So you see the else if counter executes. Now also note, whenever any of the conditional statements like the at if, at else if, or at else is not executed or skipped, like neither of their elements are rendered. Now they are not rendered at all in the DOM. They are not hidden. It's not that like they are hidden, they are not rendered at all in the DOM. So we cannot get the HTML H1 element instance of this at all. So it is just like the JavaScript will delete this and delete this and render only this. So this is how the control flow at if syntax works. Now you see that we are able to demonstrate the at else if syntax. So it's the same thing and in the same flow and also in the same shape we have in our if, else if, and else statements. They are quite similar, and this is how we were able to use it in Angular. So this makes our code very clean and maintainable. So you see, it makes our code very clean, maintainable, and we can predict at every stage what it is happening, much cleaner than when using the at ng if directive. Now also we can use the at if control flow syntax in conjunction with observables. Now let's see this. First, let's remove everything here so we can clearly see what is happening. And now let's say this counter is an observable, coming from off. Now this off operator is in RxJS library that makes it possible to create an observable stream from a value. In this case, it will create an observable that will emit the value 80. Now this counter dollar variable is what we hold the observable that it returns. Now this dollar sign here is just a variable naming convention that denotes that this variable holds an observable. Now we can conditionally render the value of what we have in this counter dollar observable. Now to do so, we can use the control flow syntax using the at if. Now we'll write the counter variable like this. Then we will subscribe to it using the async pipe. Yes, now this async pipe is used to subscribe to an observable. So it will subscribe to this counter dollar variable observable now and emit its value, and also it will unsubscribe from it when this component is being destroyed. Now we can now get the value emitted from this counter dollar variable. We first add a semicolon here, then use the as keyword, and then followed by the variable name where we want to assign the value emitted from this counter dollar variable. So we now assign it to the counter, and then followed by this. Now you see we have an error here. It says no pipe found with name async. Now this async pipe is a pipe that's a built-in pipe in Angular. So we need to import it. And now remember we said all pipes, directives, and components built inside Angular are all standalone components. So we need to import them inside the imports array of our application. So we now say async pipe. Now you see that we have imported it from the Angular / common module. Then we see that the error has gone because we have imported it. Yes. Now with this we can now access this counter variable. Now this counter variable is now accessible and alive only within these brackets. So we can now render it like this. Can now say h1 and say counter, and now render counter. We can now render the counter like this. So you see it now, counter 80. Now if we change it to 90, it will render to 90. So we can subscribe to an observable and extract the emitted value and then render it all inside the @if control flow syntax. So you see how powerful this is. Whatever we can do using the ngIf, we can also do with @if control flow. So this @if control flow syntax has made this ngIf built-in directive to be obsolete. Now we have no need of it again. You see, as our code is very clean without any additional import of the ngIf directive. So this comes to the end of this video lesson, and I hope you understood what this @if control flow syntax means. If you have any question, don't forget to drop me an email at codevanga40@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at ngarchangel.com, or you can drop a comment in the comment section in this video. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also like if you find this content very useful. In the next video course lessons, I'll be talking about the other control flow features like the @for, @switch, and @differ. Thank you so much and see you next time.